everyone, welcome back. Today we're talking about a topic we've seen for too many, well, too often as well. So, mortgage problems that may actually be mortgage abuse. Many borrowers assume the bank's always right. Like when you borrow something from the bank, we always assume the bank is right. But that's not always the case. I'm here with Christine Ferraris to talk about how consumers can recognize red flags and protect themselves. Christine, hello.
I was in.
Uh, when someone is having problems with their mortgage, how can they tell if it's just a mistake or if it's something like more serious?
I think if it's for just in general, if it's something that you've asked about and it hasn't been corrected, we see, generally speaking, a lot of consumers that come to us with having trying to dealt with a bank, and they've tried themselves, multiple times. For example, maybe they asked to have a payment delayed or a payment added to the end of the loan. And then the bank agrees, or the financial institution agrees to do so, but then they don't make the promised changes that they promised. And then all of a sudden they're being reported late, or even though they have an agreement, at least they understand, the consumer does, because they've spoken to someone who said that they would make sure that the proper paperwork gets put in place and everything. And they kind of just rely maybe on a verbal representation. And then that change didn't happen. And all of a sudden, now they're being reported against their credit for being delayed, even though they were proactive in trying to seek, extension of time or what have you to the loan, some kind of a change to the loan to allow them to maybe make maybe two payments instead of one, or a payment on a different date. And so, yeah, it's usually when there's just because these institutions are so big, one department isn't communicating with another. And, people will try for months to correct what was understood to be some kind of change, a modification, a loan modification, let's say, and they're not getting anywhere.
Oh my goodness. That is really, I can really like feel for those people, especially when
Yeah.
you have trouble like trying to figure stuff out and there's just no help. I do feel
Right.
for them.
Yes.
So, what are some common signs of mortgage servicing abuse that consumers should watch for?
Well, I usually sometimes at origination, what you were promised isn't what gets put on paper. You may expect a certain interest rate or a certain a payment amount. Maybe you didn't think you were going to get charged for what they call mortgage insurance if you're not able to put down, a large payment towards a mortgage. Um, from what I understand, there are, and this can happen with different kinds of mortgage, a home equity loan, reverse mortgages. Older people are, using their home to get some extra money they may need to for themselves or for someone they're caring for. And so what's often promised isn't delivered. And and like I said, with the modifications, they were promised something maybe on the phone, and then they don't get the documents that they were promised, or things are just not what was promised to them. And so getting someone involved early, in which probably I think this leads to another question, is, before things, get extended and extended. Sometimes people think just the phone call that they've done to their mortgage company or servicer, which it may be one and the same, is going to take care of the problem, but you really need to make sure you've documented things. And if you can communicate by email or letter and document that letter in terms of like identifying, when it was delivered and so forth. It doesn't ever necessarily have to be registered mail. It could be priority mail, it could be hand delivering it to a bank if you're dealing with just, your local bank. So, but keeping copies of communications and keeping track, keeping notes, and making sure you take names of the folks that you talk to.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I can only imagine how frustrating it must be for some people to go through something like that. I can't even imagine. It's just horrible. So, how can this is like part of a little bit of part of the question you just answered, but I just want to go a little bit deeper. So, how can these kind of mortgage issues impact a business credit and financial future?
As I mentioned, credit reporting is a big part of how we're rated. Whether you go to apply for a loan, you go to apply to rent or purchase a home, sometimes applying for jobs. Our credit scores and ratings and history um, impact us in many ways. And so when that becomes inaccurate and we don't even know about it and it gets put on there and we're not checking, that can manifest into lower scores or making you what we call a credit risk or some side of kind of maybe even if you work for a government agency. I think the federal government, monitors folks in terms of security clearances in terms of their credit score and ability to get a job, ability to get a home. Yeah, credit reports are affect our daily lives in large ways, and so making sure that information is accurate is important. And so, sometimes when a financial institution isn't reporting accurately, maybe, you did have an agreement to extend that deadline or one thing or another, or, a landlord is reporting you against it, for whatever reason, saying that you owe, more money than you believe you owe for when you move out. These are how the credit reports can become inaccurate. And it's important for consumers to monitor those when they're dealing with a financial institution, especially if you have a dispute with one. And so when consumers come to us and they report, certain conduct by a financial institution, we ask them to access their credit reports and usually by mail is what we ask them to do to get their TransUnion, Experian, and Equifax credit reports and get them from all three and look to see what's being reported. And then if it's inaccurate, dispute it with the credit reporting agencies and whomever is making those inaccurate reports. You want to dispute it with the two on two folds.
Okay, okay. Thank you for that helpful information, Christine. I just, yeah, aside from that, I really believe, like you mentioned, getting documenting information, making sure you keep track of your credit score and getting all those records from, like you mentioned, Equifax and so forth is really important. Um, the other thing, basically, what you mentioned now is gathering the evidence, right? So I just wanted to know what is the first step if someone thinks that they believe their lender or mortgage servicer is acting unfairly or illegally, what is the first steps you think they should take? Aside from gathering the information, of course, or getting the proof, if, as I could say it like that. What are the first steps that they should take?
Well, I always like to see that they've collected information and they've reported the 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 misconduct to whoever is responsible for that misconduct, right? I think and having a document that says that. Obviously, that is helpful on top of collecting the information and then bringing it to someone that should be able to help. Maybe it's the broker that helped you obtain the loan or whomever that was, that professional. And then obviously I belong to a group of attorneys that are focused on, consumer advocacy. So the National Association of Consumer Advocates, going and trying to find an attorney wherever you are that is familiar with mortgage abuses and deception and lending abuses and deception. You know, Contacting someone to find out, how they might be able to help you, or at least how you might be able to help yourself as a next step.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for that helpful information, Christine. I learned a lot. I actually did learn quite a lot from this. Um, so folks, thank you for watching. And if you have any questions or if there's anything that you would like us to do a Q&A on, please feel free to leave it in the comments below. And thank you for watching. Christine, thank you for your time and may you have a lovely, lovely day further. We
You,
appreciate always your helpful information like always.
thank you, Lizette, and you do the same. Enjoy the rest of your day. or
Okay,
evening.
thank you guys. Yeah, evening. Have a great day, guys. Remember to comment, like, and subscribe for more videos. Christine.